Why every Black life matters, but also why we do not support the Black Lives Matter organization. Welcome back, everybody, to another Polypat Paradigm with Eric Robinson and myself. Look, heads up, this is going to be a thorny conversation. This will probably be a conversation that makes people quite uncomfortable, but we feel that there is an obligation to have these types of conversations, especially in our current environment, to do the best we can to work our way through what can often be very morally difficult situations in an extremely heated political climate. So we're going to talk about justice. We're going to talk about the whole state of affairs. I don't need to explain what's going on. Everybody knows what's going on in the world today. And we're going to try to navigate through this from a decidedly Catholic perspective of how Catholics, I don't want to say absolutely must respond, because in situations there can often be many morally right answers. But we can talk about some principles, some background information, and some rules of practical good reasoning to help us navigate not just this particular situation, but any difficult life situation, personal, political. Life is suffused with moral challenges when the right response and the right answer is not always easy to see. And that is what we intend to do on this episode. And I want to invite everybody listening to join us for what I hope will be a very patient, careful, but also charitable conversation as well. Eric, any opening thoughts or remarks?
Yeah, it's interesting how the media and our society, kind of paint certain narratives of things, and like it forces us almost to enter into the conversation. And we do want to enter into conversation as far as if there are injustices going on. As Christians, we are called to fight those.
Correct.
We're called to be light in the world. And one thing I love about the Catholic faith is that it's Catholic, it's universal. So we have every tongue and tribe, every nation 2 billion people are Catholic in the world. So we have people in America, we have people in Africa, we have people in China, we have people in Europe and South America and Australia, everywhere in the world. Black, white, Hispanic, Chinese, like every race under heaven is like, there's people in every single nation, every single type of people are Christian or Catholic. And that's such a beautiful thing. And so I think if, people can get a glimpse of the fact that the church really is a sign and instrument for man's salvation, that really we are a sign of like the new world, if you will, like the new humanity of all being equal and one under God. And so that's what I love about it, is that it goes beyond borders. It's the kingdom of God. And whenever we see injustices, whenever we see human dignity not being lifted high against any person, we want to fight that, because Jesus died for every person. and we're called even to die for our enemies. So even if we thought someone was our enemy, we're called to die for them, to love them. And that's the gospel, is like we're called to love God with all that we have and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And over again, we see in Scripture, especially in the New Testament, Jesus condemns, the Holy Spirit condemns partiality. When we show favor to one person over another, over some silly thing, or over anything, really. And so we're not called to show partiality, and everyone is called, we're all going to be judged by Jesus in the end. And it's equal. The playing field is equal. And the judgment seat of Christ makes that so.
So I think we should start with justice and human dignity in general. And we should try and gain some clarity here. And then I think that will guide the conversation as we kind of move deeper into some of the political weeds. And the first thing I want to say is that Catholics are called to be Catholics. Catholics are not called to be Republicans. Catholics are not called to be Democrats. Catholics are called to be Catholics. Political parties can change and often do change. So if you have just linked yourself, come hell or high water, to any political movement, that itself is a big problem. That itself is a big mistake. You are called first and foremost to be Catholic, to live a Catholic life, to understand the teachings of the church, and to strive to be as faithful and orthodox as possible. And that life is what should guide your political decision making and how you enter the public life and then begin to promote the common good. Let it also be said that, yeah, when it comes to human dignity, it is a core commitment of the Catholic faith that every person is made in the image and likeness of God. And the Catholic Church has a wonderfully worked out philosophical anthropology of what a person is, right? To be made in the image and likeness of God is to be a rational animal. That's what the human being is. And so we cannot discriminate on, against anybody because of some contingent accident, like the color of their skin, right? Of something that could have been different about somebody, but has no essential bearing on what they are as a human person, right? So whether somebody has white skin or black skin, whether somebody is walking or not walking, or depending on somebody's location, stage of development, the environment they're in, none of these are adequate grounds for discrimination ever. And this is where Catholics have, I believe, the most beautiful, robust, and consistent paradigm of human dignity. We draw no arbitrary lines, right? All races, all ethnicities, all ages, all sizes, all human, all of them are to be afforded the human dignity that they're owed by God.
And this is part, I was just going to say, this is part of the scandal of the gospel, is that it united Jews and Gentiles in one body in the church. That now, hey, you can't just, we're going to have our Jewish stuff here and the Gentiles are over there, and we're going to estrange people, we're going to shoo them off, or Gentiles against the Jews or anything like that. It's like, no, now we're one body. Correct. And Christ broke down the dividing wall of hostility between Jew and Gentile, between all these different things. And so, yeah, human dignity goes to the, and what better way to display human dignity on God's behalf than becoming one of us and dwelling among us? That elevated human dignity to a whole new level. But like you said, we are created in the image and likeness of God. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Pat. So if you want to.
No, that's a nice supplement, Eric, to really what I was saying. And the point is this actually creates problems politically for Catholics. It's because we draw no arbitrary stopping points to human dignity that sometimes we can get caught in political situations where we're asked to really expense one form of human dignity for another. And just to kind of like cut ahead a little bit, that's one of the issues with the Black Lives Matter organization, is we can agree with them strongly on some things, but we must strongly oppose them on other things, like abortion, for example. And even though this isn't a formal policy on their website anymore, they've been very vocal about their support for abortion throughout social media, on Twitter, and even previously, and virtually all their founders and organizational leaders are radical on this issue, quite extremely radical on the abortion issue. And this is one of the reasons that Catholics have to take a principled stance and say, look, I can agree with you on issue X, Y, and Z, but I can never, ever support you as an organization so long as you are promoting policy W, right? Abortion, or the destruction of the nuclear family unit, which they still have listed on their website, right? Because as Catholic Christians, we not only have to uphold the dignity of human beings from conception till natural death, but we also hold very firmly and rightly that the family unit is the first society, right? We cannot have a good society without first having a healthy, stable family unit. So there's many other policies that the Black Lives Matter organization strongly promotes, or at least even if indirectly, but also really strongly promotes, that Catholics have to take a principled stand on and say, I cannot cooperate with this. And this is a matter of prudence. And prudence is practical, good reasoning. And you develop in the habit of prudence, the virtue of prudence, when you have a sort of moral clarity. You can kind of like make automatically good moral assessments and moral judgments. That's what prudence is about. And being able to see this clearly, that you're not being taken in by what is ultimately a political Trojan horse. They can get you in on something you agree with, but then you're engaging in either some degree of cooperation with evil that's where you have to have the clarity and draw the line. You cannot agree or cooperate in any significant degree with evil, even if you agree on other stances. And I want to say I do agree on other stances with the Black Lives Matter organization, but it's the stances I absolutely strongly oppose, which is why I can never support that. Now, the other thing I'll add to this, just to kind of give an analogy to flip examples, is take the Black Panthers, for example, right? People are probably familiar with them. They are an organization that I don't think any Catholic in good conscience could support, the means that they've used and some of the things that they promoted. However, they historically have been adamantly anti-abortion and anti-birth control. From the Black Panthers, you would often hear remarks that birth control and abortion were forms of Black genocide. Now, as a Catholic, I can agree with a lot of that, but I could never in good conscience support either directly or indirectly the Black Panthers. Another example might be this. Somebody could be pro-Irish, but anti-IRA. And in fact, I think you should be. I think you should be pro-Irish, but anti-IRA. And here's where you have to be honest with yourself, wherever you're coming from, wherever you are in the political organization. This is where I'm asking for charity on the part of listeners who might disagree with us. Is you can think that I'm wrong on abortion, right? You can think that I'm wrong on abortion, right? Now, as Catholics, you don't have that room. The church strongly condemns abortion, but say you're not Catholic. So you're just listening in. Okay, well, I think you're wrong on abortion. That's a different debate. But what you can expect is, what you can't reasonably expect is for somebody to promote an organization that itself promotes something that you think is gravely immoral. Even if you disagree on that thing, you can't reasonably, honestly, and charitably expect somebody to promote an organization that itself promotes something that you think is gravely immoral. And that is something that I don't see being properly recognized by a lot of people in this debate. They think that if you don't wave the flag for the Black Lives Matter movement, the only reason is because you are inherently a white supremacist or something like that. Now, all the reasons why this is so clearly fallacious would take more than one episode to spell out, and is an utter lack of charity. The truth is that it's a complex issue with many complex facets in and of itself. But regardless of where you're coming from, and I would extend the same to anybody else. Like, maybe we flip the example, right? Maybe you think abortion is actually a really important right, and you couldn't support any organization that is like that I would support that tries to do away with abortion, right? But maybe you agree with that organization on another issue, for example. So say there's a Christian organization that is out there trying to work with homeless populations, for example, and they're doing, and you agree with all that. You think that that's awesome. But I couldn't expect you to donate to that organization reasonably if you knew that organization was also promoting pro-life policies, because you think that that is a horrible thing. Now, I think you're wrong about that, but that's a different debate. That's the distinction I'm trying to draw. That's a different debate. And I wouldn't charge you with just hating homeless people if you withheld support from that group because you understood that that group was cooperating with pro-life policies that you have a principled stance against. And I don't know how better or more clearly to articulate these distinctions. I really don't. I think they're things that you're either going to see in good faith and charity and recognize and be willing to have the conversation. And if you can't see or make these distinctions, then you might just be beyond the reach of argument. And that might itself seem uncharitable, but I don't know how else to articulate it. But this is it. For me, it ultimately comes down to that in the broad strokes.
Yeah. You know, Pat, I think it's also good to actually just read from the Black Lives Matter website about what they believe on just a few things. So you mentioned the destruction of the nuclear family. So here's what it says. This is from the Black Lives Matter website, what they believe. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. Now, obviously, for me, just reading that, it's like, well, that's great to have a community environment, like where people are, taking care of one another. But also, we really need to promote, like, there being a father and a mother over their children and like that core nuclear family. Like, so it's just interesting how they kind of pit those two things against one another.
Yeah, that should be a clear both and. We want the nuclear family unit and the extended family.
Exactly.
And yes.
The next line there says, we foster a queer affirming network. When we gather, we do so with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking, or rather the belief that all in the world are heterosexual unless she or he or they disclose otherwise. That's kind of an interesting one.
Right. So here's another thing, right? As Catholics, we are affirmed to love everybody, full stop, right? But there are certain lines that cannot be crossed, right? So gender ideology is one of them, right? And look, this is not just a religious thing. This is, I think, a common sense thing. It's a philosophical thing. It's a scientific thing. A man can't be a woman. A man cannot change substantially what he is into a woman. That's just fantasy. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be compassionate and caring to anybody who struggles with gender issues at all. That's not what we're saying. But we cannot promote an ideology that is anti-reality. We just can't do it. That as certainly as Catholics, we have to believe is harmful. It's harmful to the greater good. It's harmful to family units. It's harmful to children. We could never, in good conscience, support an organization that is promoting a radically postmodernist ideology and gender ideology like that. Now, people, again, maybe you think we're wrong on this. Maybe you think that, trans women are women. I certainly don't think that at all. I think that there's every good argument against current gender ideology from every angle, philosophical, scientific. I don't think there's any good arguments for it at all. It's just almost pure rhetoric and a lot of bullying, quite frankly. And some of the stuff that's going on in the academic level, the bullying, the threats, forcing people to resign when they try to take a stance against this is really quite sick. In fact, you're seeing it at J.K. Rowling right now.
I was just going to mention that.
Right? The Harry Potter, who is very much a feminist and on the left. And she's saying, no, this ideology is really harmful. And people are really trying to cancel her and take her through the ringer. But good for her for taking a principled stance on that.
This shows you just how crazy our world is. She just, I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, she tweeted out a statement just saying like, men can't menstruate.
They can't.
They don't have periods. And it's like, that's an objectively true statement. Like there's just no question about that. And she got like just blown up like for that. And so I do want to just real quick, there's two more lines from the Black Lives Matter website that is going in on this as well. So it says, we make space for transgender brothers and sisters to participate and lead. We are self-reflexive and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift Black trans folk, especially Black trans women who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence. And once again, like, I don't want to have, like, anyone who struggles with gender issues, there should never be violence against that person. Like, only love and like helping them to overcome like the difficulties that come with being confused about your gender, like, okay. But does that mean we now have to like just say, well, yeah, there really are no genders, or
no. And that's immoral, because we have a moral obligation to seek truth. We have a moral obligation to seek truth and to avoid speaking lies. So again, you might think that we're wrong on this. Maybe you think that men can menstruate. I would love to hear any argument that you could. I honestly would, and I would be very patient, and I would. And I've read the literature on this. Like, again, I'm in the philosophy world. I read the professional literature on this stuff. I'm not unfamiliar with the cases, right? I've engaged with it. I think it's nonsense. It is. But just because I think it's nonsense doesn't mean we want violence against people. Of course not. Unless you define violence as putting out a sentence on Twitter saying men can't menstruate. Then we just have a strong disagreement on definitions. Put all that aside, because it's not entirely necessary to the point we're making. The point we're making is, maybe you think we're wrong on this, But even if so, you can't expect us to, in good conscience, support an organization that is promoting things we think are gravely immoral or gravely untrue.
Yeah.
That's the point. And you can't just immediately hop to the idea that, oh, they're just trying to keep racial structures in society. Of course not. And in fact, and I know we're going to get into this, I am happy to admit that there are massive structural inequalities that have resulted from our country's past racism,
Yeah.
and that they are massively unjust and that they are deserving of correction. Now, we might disagree on what some of the examples are and some of the evidence, but I'm fully willing to acknowledge it. In fact, I've actively argued for it many times. And the paradigm example case that we're going to get into that many people want to hear is abortion. That is the paradigm example case in my mind, where you have clearly racist roots, where you can still find the primary documents of the horribly racist and eugenic sentiments behind Planned Parenthood, and that through its history has resulted in massive structural inequalities that is to this day disproportionately affecting Black people. Undoubtedly, easily quantifiable, easily measurable in a way that some of the other examples that people point to just aren't. But here's an example of an institution that has clearly racist roots, horribly immoral foundations, has resulted in massive structural inequalities that disproportionately affect Black people enormously.
And that's the irony of this whole situation, where there's like chanting about defunding the police and all these things that are, you know, structural inequalities or injustices. And it's like, I definitely believe that there are systematic injustices and systematic racism in America, in other countries. But the number one example isn't police, then, because there are Black cops. There's and maybe, you know, obviously there is police brutality, there is police violence, and that needs to end, right? But the number one, like, obvious systematic injustice is abortion. And that's so crazy to me, how this organization, Black Lives Matter, like you say, I mean, it's not explicit on their website, but a lot of the leaders blatantly support abortion. And so how does that make sense?
And
So
they've expressed their support on abortion across all their major social media channels. I mean, people have shared all their tweets previously promoting abortion. So this is not like something that they just keep hidden by any means, even if it's formally on their website anymore.
And if this YouTube video or podcast goes viral because we're two white guys talking about this, then I want everyone.
But arguments don't have race, just like arguments don't have gender.
Right.
And you can take arguments and put it in the mouth of a Black person, and they've been in the mouths of Black people. It just doesn't get an attention when Black people say these things, because it doesn't fit a certain narrative. So arguments don't have gender. That's a clear fallacy.
Yeah.
So I won't entertain that nonsense for a minute. But the point is, and I just want to press this because it's so important. And in the literature of systemic racism, it's interesting because there's a lot of equivocation and slipperiness with the term racism, because a lot of these people who promote this will say that there can be systemic racism even if there's no individual racists. So then we have to be careful. Well, what do we even mean by racism? If we mean by structural inequalities, so for example, let's go to Planned Parenthood. I think this is the good example where it has clearly historically racist roots, where people were legitimately racist. But we don't have to admit that anybody working in Planned Parenthood today is individually racist, for example. But the structural inequalities are still there. Now, maybe some of them are, but same thing with police officers. But here's the thing with the police is, like, we don't have the type of data for the inequalities and in fact, we have data that counts towards the opposite. Michigan State did a study not too long ago that showed that you were more likely to die in an encounter with police if you were white than Black. Now, people have disputed that data, and that's fine. I think you can certainly argue it. But that just puts us at a position of kind of like, we're not sure if this is here. We don't have massive evidence in favor of it like we do for Planned Parenthood. So if you're pointing to examples of what people would call systemic racism, there seems to be a huge, huge, obvious paradigm case of it that everybody should be calling out.
Right.
And then, but the one that people are going after is the one where the evidence we do have, if anything, counts in the opposite direction.
Right.
That it's not there. Right. And that doesn't mean that there aren't individually racist or unjust acts. There are. And those always deserve to be condemned. Always. And I'm sure Eric will be the first to condemn them with
Yeah.
anybody whenever they occur. And I'm not dismissing anecdotes. I'm not dismissing that there aren't other, I'm not dismissing even that there aren't other inequalities in society that might themselves lead to more contact with the police, right? But that's a different argument. That's a different conversation versus police are just themselves actively going out and committing personally racist things. Those are, and again, this is why philosophy is important, because philosophy is drawing the right distinctions. And if you don't draw the right distinctions, you're going to blur things together and you're going to have the wrong positions.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a couple other things, I guess, for Catholics to think about in that regard.
No, those are some great distinctions to keep in mind of. So I did some research last night because, so a few years ago, I watched this YouTube series that was put on by, I don't think it's just for YouTube, but it was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece. I think her name's Alveda King. And it was a series called the Ma'afa. And it was awesome. Like, it was a great series. It was so informative. And it talked about and it showed the data on the systemic racism of Planned Parenthood. And so here's a quote from the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger. In 1939, she writes a letter to Dr. Clarence Gamble, C.J. Gamble. And you can see this on I might post this letter on my podcast then so y'all can see it. And so here's just one small little quote from that letter, December 10th, 1939, letter from the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger. She says this: "We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population." Like, that's about as clear as you can get as far as like the racist foundation of Planned Parenthood.
Yeah,
And
go ahead, Eric.
The Ma'afa video went on to show how, and here's the tricky part, is because abortion's guised as some sort of right that actually helps minorities when they get in these, pregnancy situations, it's guised like that. But what is the truth? The truth is that Margaret Sanger placed Planned Parenthood purposefully in minority communities so that she could carry out this plan to exterminate the Black population. Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to hear that. And as last I checked with the Ma'afa videos, is that the birth rate was less than the death rate in the Black population in America. And that's just, and so it's working. Like, their plan is working to exterminate the Negro population. And that's awful. Like, that is an awful thing. And so it's not like, it can't get much worse than that.
And it's not like the Black community hasn't picked up on this. Like the Black Panthers, for whatever else you want to say about the Black Panthers, we're very clear that this is a form of Black genocide.
It is.
They called it Black genocide. So it's not like Black people have like not called this out in history. Many, many, many have. They just haven't been, certainly not in modern days, picked up by the mainstream media narrative that is incredibly, let's just be very frank, incredibly far left politically, and willing to spin anything that they can to keep their flagrant lies going in this regard.
It was about a year ago. I was at a Catholic church in Beaumont, Texas, and outside the church after Mass, there was a sign put on, I think, by the people in the church, and it was a group of Black people that had signs that say "Black Lives Matter in the womb," and it showed like a baby in the womb, and that's so true. Like, and this goes for every race, right? All lives do matter, from conception to natural death. And if you're going to promote the fact that every Black life matters, which I'm all for promoting that, every life matters. All of our Black brothers and sisters, they matter. They're made in the image and likeness of God. It doesn't get much more amazing than that. And it matters from conception to natural death. So if you really believe Black lives matter, then you must oppose abortion. You must oppose it. Like, it just doesn't make sense that you're going to say on one hand that Black lives matter, but on the other hand, you're going to kill Black lives. How does that make any sense to anyone?
And I want to point out something, because somebody might be worrying about a fallacy that comes up a lot, which is the fallacy of whataboutism. So, somebody says Black lives matter, and somebody says all lives matter. And I don't like that response. I think that that is a dumb response because you hear it in the pro-life community a lot too. People will say
Mm-hmm.
baby lives matters, and people, the retort will be, well, what about children who need to be adopted, right? And this is the fallacy of, well, what it's called, the fallacy of whataboutism, because you always say what about,
Yeah.
and it's specifically, it's a fallacy of diversion. That's
Yeah.
not the issue we're focusing on. But what Eric is actually pointing out is a matter of consistency. We agree specifically on Black Lives Matter. We're not talking about
Yeah.
white lives or this. Yes, they do important, but it's because you care about Black Lives Matter that you must care about the lives of Black babies as
Right.
well. And you cannot expect me to support the Black Lives Matter organization because I do think that Black Lives Matter and it's promoting policies that are exterminating Black lives, innocent Black lives. So it's actually because I truly do believe Black Lives Matter, and I'm willing to focus specifically on this issue, as I
Yeah.
have consistently now for years with abortion. It's precisely because I care so much about Black lives that I could never in good conscience support the Black Lives Matter organization.
Well, imagine this. Imagine that there was an organization that said, let's say it's during the 1940s in Germany, that said Jewish lives matter, but they supported the systemic killing of Jewish lives in concentration camps. You'd be like, what? Like, how does that make sense?
Right.
And like this, and so truly there is systemic racism in this country, but it's not what you are being told in the media. Like it's,
No. Or
it's
that's not that's by far not the paradigm example.
right. Like
Mm-hmm.
exterminating the lives of these Black men and women in the womb. That's what's just dismantling the 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 Black population in America and throughout the world. And yeah, and so we are focusing on Black lives in particular here, but that's why, like you say, we can't just focus on that without talking about the big elephant in the room, which is abortion. And really the number one killer of Black people right now is abortion.
Yeah. Now, let me tell you, if the Black Lives Matter organization became pro-life and it got rid of all this other stuff, you'll see me out there the next day, right?
Yeah.
There's no question about it. There's no
Yeah.
question about it. And somebody, I was getting a conversation with somebody who says, okay, well, all right, and they were charitable. They said, I understand that, but the Black Lives Matter movement isn't the same thing as the Black Lives Matter organization. And I think that itself is a fair point. But what I have to
Yeah.
say is that when it comes to, we have to, again, think about degrees of cooperation. And just as so this, she said specifically, the phrase Black Lives Matter isn't the Black Lives Matter organization. And I said, fair enough, but the phrase my body, my choice isn't Planned Parenthood. But we all know what that's going to support, what that's promoting, where the hashtags leave, and so on and so forth. So we
Yeah.
have to make a prudential judgment about degrees of cooperation, formal material cooperation, right? There's a lot of ways we can break this down. And then we have to decide, is there a sort of culpable degree of cooperation with potential evil here, there? And that's a more difficult one to get at. That is
Mm-hmm.
a more difficult one to get at. But I think you can have, again, principled reasons for wanting to associate with even that phrase at all, because
Mm-hmm.
we know what it goes on to promote downstream.
And I do want to comment again on the Black Lives Matter and the All Lives Matter response. I think there is a time and a place where it's appropriate to just focus on Black Lives Matter, like because there has been such injustices against Black people in our history. So it's okay to highlight that. It's good to highlight that because,
Right.
and the church herself has a preferential treatment of the poor, a preferential treatment for the least of these, because Jesus himself says, whatever you've done to the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you've done to me. Whatever you did not do to the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did not do to me.
Right.
So the church herself has such solidarity with the poor, the oppressed, those who are facing injustices. The church automatically like flies to them and says, we're with you. We're with you.
Mhm.
We're with you. We're with you. And I wanted to actually read this real quick. I just think this is such a beautiful line. I just found it the other day from the Second Vatican Council, their document on Church in the Modern World, Gaudium et Spes. And this is paragraph 1. And I think this is really why Pat Flynn and I are wanting to engage in this conversation, because when our brothers and sisters in Christ and any human being is feeling hurt and a sense of injustice, we feel it. and we're meant to feel it. And so it says this: the joys and the hopes, the griefs and the anxieties of the men of this age, especially those who are poor or in any way afflicted, these are the joys and hopes, the griefs and anxieties of the followers of Christ. Indeed, nothing genuinely human fails to raise an echo in their hearts, for theirs is a community composed of men united in Christ. They are led by the Holy Spirit in their journey to the kingdom of their Father, and they have welcomed the news of salvation, which is meant for every man, every person. That is why this community realizes that it is truly linked with mankind and its history by the deepest of bonds. And so the church really does have a preferential treatment of the poor. And we feel human, we feel the anxieties over coronavirus, over the racism, over all the things that are flooding our world right now. And we feel the joys of new life and of hope and of all these things. God became man and dwelt among us in the person of Jesus Christ. He was rich and he became poor so that we who are poor might become rich. That is incorporated into the divine life. So it's important to talk about it. And it's important also to highlight when a certain group of people are being attacked, we need to stand in solidarity with them and fight on their behalf. So that goes across the board for any.
And we have to be extremely resistant to what is ideological mob mentality that really seems to care less about true justice and more about Trojan horsing through a political agenda.
And that's what it feels like is happening, honestly.
Yeah,
it feels like there's some murky stuff going on to where it's like, well, wait, what do they care about really? It feels like an agenda is being pushed that's like apart from the actual issue that they're wanting to fight.
There clearly is, and part of the reasons that when I was condemning, I wrote a blog that was called "Is Rioting Morally Justified?" and I said no. And part of what's awful about this is it's diverting from any justice or attention that is owed to the specific issues, and there is very much a political Trojan horse going on. Robbie P. George had a nice post. I just want to read it real quick. So he's a good commentator in the Catholic world. He says, if someone wants to give you reasons for thinking as he does or joining his cause, listen to his argument and critically assess its merits. If, however, he seeks to bully you into accepting his ideological dogmas or shame you into participating into his rituals, don't give an inch. I think that's extremely prudent advice in these days. If it smells fishy but people are pressuring you and bullying you and you realize, no, there seems to be something wrong about this.
Yeah.
You don't give a single inch. I will never give a single inch on something that I think is unjust. I will never say or affirm something that I think is untrue, no matter how much people try to pressure me or bully. And look, they've tried. Certainly, I've been a public figure for many years. People have tried to cancel me left and right on various times. Not as outwardly as other people on social media. And, because they'll say, well, your silence is violence. Well, first off, there's a reason that arguments from silence are notoriously weak and very often fallacious, is because people might be silent for a ton of reasons. Maybe they're silent on the Black Lives Matter movement because they are racist. Maybe that's true. Or maybe they're silent on the Black Lives Matter movement for everything that we just said on this podcast. Right?
Right. Yeah.
So that's why you can't make any type of valid inference from somebody's silence. So I will never, ever give any credence to that type of nonsense. It's nonsense. It's appeals to the stick, which is a fallacy, appeals to bullying. There's poisoning the well. This whole thing is just so, if your cause was that just and that pure, I promise you wouldn't have to bully me into it. I really do mean that. You wouldn't have to try and bully me or pressure me into it. And it's for all these principled reasons that I cannot ever in good conscience endorse or even in any sort of way support the Black Lives Matter organization. But I think maybe what we can do is talk about the things that we do support, because there's still many practical steps that Catholics can take, should be taking, and probably many of them have already been taking to help people. Not just in America, but all over the world. There's racial injustices all over the world. But of course, moral obligations are more binding according to certain proximity, for example, right? So I have a stronger obligation to my children because they are my children in proximity than I do to somebody's children halfway across the world, for example. One, because it's not even possible for me to even have that, but also because of the special relationship. And same thing within my local communities. And, this is one of the beautiful things that our parish does is we have sister parishes in multiple places. One in the city, which we do a ton of work for, a lot of charity support, not just financial, but just like a lot of time and giving there too. And one in Peru. And there's ways that Catholics can and should fight against all injustices, racial or otherwise, within the Catholic Church without aligning themselves to other radical political organizations. And so what if you don't get kudos on social media for it? So what? It's not about, right? You don't be a hypocrite when you pray, right? It comes back to that. Like if you're just doing this so you don't get bullied on social media, or that people, give you some half sincere lip service or false praise on social, that itself is immoral, right? That's a sin of like dissimulation, if nothing else.
The fear of man is a snare, it says in Proverbs. And I see a lot of that on social media. Like people are just afraid of what people think about them. And you need to have the fear of God. Like you need to actually be in awe and in love with God and care about what he thinks, not what other people think, and care about the truth and proclaiming the truth. Most of, like it even says in scripture, if you seek to live a godly life, you will be persecuted. Like you will be. It is not popular to say the things that we're saying on this podcast. And it hasn't been popular ever because mankind is sinful. And like, think about if you were to talk about how homosexual acts are intrinsically evil at the time of Sodom and Gomorrah. Probably wouldn't go over well. Probably not going to go over well in any age of humanity since the fall, because people don't want to hear that things are wrong. They want to hear that they can do whatever they want and put you in a corner.
Right. Not only, and let me just mention this, not because I think it's not always, you focus on the arguments and the reasons and the evidence first, but I think this is relevant in one sense. So that one man who really facilitated my conversion, his name was Father Wilfred. He was a black priest from Africa. And it's funny how the Catholic Church sees America as like mission territory. They have to send like the good Orthodox priests from Africa to come save the church over here because it's just so infested with political ideology. And this man was so beautiful. He'd always start off, he always brought his African culture with him, which was great. And he'd start off with chanting and singing, God is good all the time. Everyone's all the time, God is good. People would chant back to him. He was so joyful. He was one of the most beautiful priests I've ever had. His name, Father Wilfred. Unfortunately, since we moved, I haven't seen him. But the joy and the orthodoxy, right? I haven't talked to him about this stuff, but I tell you, for one, I can guarantee he would not have stood for any of this political nonsense that's going on here. I'm a guarantee that he would condemn everything that the Black Lives Matter organization, not everything, because again, there's some points that we can agree on, but everything that we've talked about, I'm sure he would agree with that. And having him in my life, of having this beautiful, like, it was just one of those moments where I realized how much, and this is something that people in Africa, Catholics in Africa, point out all the time, is this sort of unearned, undeserved condescension that all of us have towards their culture because they're not as materially well off or technologically advanced. So many of them say, look, we don't want your liberalism over here, right? We don't want that spiritual disease over here. One of my favorite cardinals in the Catholic Church, Cardinal Sarah, another beautiful cardinal from Africa, right? His book, The Power of Silence, is incredible. He cannot stand radical leftist ideology, right? Again, of course, from Africa, Black man. Where's his opinion matters in all this, certainly. And it's not only just his opinion, he's actually got good arguments against all of it too.
Yeah.
So just like, I actually so admire so much of the Black community, especially the Catholics in Africa, as models of what the white community should be here, right? The joy, the orthodoxy, their focus on the bigger picture, the transcendent horizon that we're all going to. and their ability to see through the ideological and political fog in a way that so many Americans are unable to do.
Yeah.
I see that over there from so many of them. I'm like, yeah, we need to be looking to them for inspiration on a lot of this.
That's awesome. And yeah, it seems like the whole system right now in America is just planting more division, planting more violence among people, and it's like not actually helping anything. And it's because it is rooted in political ideology rather than the truth.
Right.
And that's where you get, it's just so awful when that happens. And I love that Catechism says this: without the help of grace, men would not know how to discern the often narrow path between cowardice, which gives into evil, and the violence which, under the illusion of fighting evil, only makes it worse.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of the riots with that, like whenever we're faced with injustices for ourselves as Catholics, it says in Scripture, overcome evil with good. Overcome this evil with that joy and orthodoxy. Overcome this evil with like actually having awesome friendships with our Black brothers and sisters. Overcome this evil with good. Like overcome the evil with abortion with good. Overcome, and and listen, I love arguments and taking things, because St. Paul says take every thought captive. That thought that's going on in the world, that you have to support the transgender movement, like their ideology. You have to support this ideology over here. You have to support this. We're going to take those thoughts captive. We're going to look at them and we're going to see, okay, we're listening. Then we're going to critique what it is. And then we're going to propose a solution. That's what actually the Catholic Church did in their document in 2019 about the transgenderism, is like, well, let's listen. Okay, here's our critique of it. Here's why it doesn't make sense. And here's why actually, even though your heart sometimes is in the right place, here's why this other perspective that we're going to propose is actually fully in alignment. Like, yes, to valuing human dignity at its full. And so I love that method of listen, critique, propose. And we also need to be strong, speak the truth in love. And I think sometimes we do, and I'm guilty of this too, like wanting to protect myself instead of like actually standing up for the truth when it's so unpopular to say it. Like, if you question any of the rhetoric that's happening right now, it's like you're lambasted, like J.K. Rowling was, who's completely left, but she was lambasted. And, you can't hide from that. But in the end, truth wins, love wins, God wins.
Correct. And there is, a lot of cowardliness around here, and half sincere lip service. And I don't really want to get into that all too much, but I hope that this conversation serves two purposes. One is if you disagree with anybody who hasn't supported the Black Lives Matter movement, I hope you can see the principled distinctions that we're making. And I hope you can see why people can have principled reasons, more reasons. Maybe you don't even agree with them, but there are reasons for why they don't support the Black Lives Matter organization and aren't hopping onto this bandwagon. And if you disagree with those reasons, at least see that those reasons are a different conversation, right? And for those of you who have just felt confused by all this, or what to say from the more Catholic perspective, hopefully this gives you some ideas and some fortification, if nothing else.
And to give people a glimpse too, who might be listening, who think, okay, they're just a bunch of religious bigots or whatever. Here's the Catholic perspective on the poor and the oppressed. Once again, I mentioned it before, but if I'm oppressing a fellow human being, I'm oppressing my Savior, Jesus Christ. I'm oppressing God. That's heavy. I don't want to do that ever. And so that's why I want, and vice versa. Like if I'm doing something good to someone who is being oppressed or who is feeling these injustices or who's actually having injustices done to them, then I'm doing that good to my Savior, Jesus Christ.
Right.
And because of my love for Jesus, I'm going to love every single human being. And so I'm totally against oppression because that's oppressing Jesus.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that except for say, a bigot is somebody who's intolerant to the viewpoints of other people. And the whole point of tolerance, if you're going to be tolerant, entails that you disagree with somebody, right? So just disagreeing with somebody isn't being intolerant. In fact, you have to disagree with something before you can even tolerate it.
Well, see, Pat, the hard part with our society right now, and I think you've probably noticed this move, that it's not even tolerance that people are after. It's, we don't want, like, let's talk
No,
about,
they don't want tolerance anymore. They moved away from that. They want affirmation.
they want celebration.
Yeah. So if you're asking that from me, no, I will never
Yeah.
celebrate something I think is wrong ever.
Yeah.
Will I tolerate? And here's another distinction, right?
Yeah.
Every single person deserves respect and is owed the dignity that they have in virtue of being created in the image and likeness of God. But not every ideology deserves that. Not
Yeah.
every
Some
idea
ideologies need to be
deserves that.
destroyed.
And that's obviously something that everybody agrees with. Even the person who's listening to us thinking that we're just religious bigots, you probably think that our ideology needs to be destroyed, right? Or Nazism or fascism. Like, so everybody agrees with this. The only question is, what is the right ideology? What are the right beliefs? What is the good, really and truly? And of course, I would argue, as I have argued, to even understand the good requires an understanding of God. And to understanding the good of the human person requires a philosophical anthropology of what a human person is and what our final end is. And when you answer these moral questions clearly and consistently, I would argue, as I have argued, you're going to get to the Catholic Church on all of this. So, yeah, a lot of these tie into much deeper philosophical and theological conversations. The problem is people stay too much on the tip of the iceberg. They never go down to the bottom. But if you want to have clarity at the top, you need to start at the bottom. You need to have a good foundation. So yeah, any ad hominems or poisoning the well, again, for anybody who's listening, and if you deal with that, don't give it an inch. Some people are on issues like this. They are beyond the reach of reason. They are truly indoctrinated in the most radical sense of cult indoctrination. And you have to just do what you can to be charitable, to say what you know is true, and say it in the way that you can best articulate the position. And sometimes you will just be attacked, and that's the end of it. And you won't come away feeling particularly good. But you can at least, rest in good conscience, knowing that you followed what was true and promoted what was good. And sometimes that's the best we can do in tough situations.
I think that's a good note to end on. Unless you have anything more to add.
That's it, man. These are tricky conversations, but we'd love to hear from anybody listening. So if you agree with it, if this was helpful, we'd love to hear your perspective. If we've missed anything, we'd love to hear that too. If you disagree, feel free. I obviously would not promise that I'm going to affirm anything just because we disagree, but I can promise you that I will always charitably listen.